Let's go further in depth on this subject now, and to do so, we're joined by former Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, a noted defense attorney in his own right. He is also the author of the e-book Terror Tunnels, the case for Israel's just war against Hamas, and of course, he's also a blogger for Newsmax.com. Alan, it's so good to have you joining us by phone this morning.
Thank you. I hope everybody had a nice holiday. We did.
Yes, it was a great holiday, and as we all return to work, there's a lot to talk about, including what may be coming next in Israel with the possibility of that Iranian nuclear program accelerating now. But first, let's keep it here at home in the United States. Al Sharpton saying, quote, "Justice will come to Ferguson." The rhetoric continues. What will be the reality in the courts, Alan?
Well, I think there will be a civil lawsuit. That is a personal lawsuit by the Brown family for loss of their son against probably the Ferguson Police Department and the individual, now not Officer Wilson. Unpredictable how that will come out. This has always been a very close case. The first shots fired were legitimate without any doubt when Brown came up to the car and tried to wrestle the gun away. The second shots are close questions, and close questions ought to always be resolved in favor of the defendant, even if he's a policeman, in a criminal case. So I'm not critical of the grand jury verdict. I'm a little critical of the process. The process sounded a little bit phony to me. I think the prosecutor had made up his own mind already what to do, and it may have been the right decision. But then he presented a skewed case, apparently, to the grand jury, very much against seeking an indictment. Prosecutors do that all the time, usually seeking an indictment. This time the shoe was on the other foot. So there will be a civil suit, unpredictable outcome. I do not think there'll be a federal criminal prosecution against Wilson. There may be some federal interest in how Ferguson polices and how the grand jury process operates. That would be more general. So Sharpton may be right that justice may be coming to Ferguson, but I don't think we're going to see any further consequences to Officer Wilson.
Well, Alan, let's continue to talk about the possibility of federal charges as advocates on both sides showed up on Sunday talk shows yesterday. We'll get a sampling of what they had to say, then get your reaction.
Well, Chris, obviously they have the option of a civil lawsuit, one on civil rights basis against Officer Wilson, two against the police department in the city of Ferguson, if that time comes. Those are not issues that we discuss publicly upon our team. We will certainly give the parties a chance to work that out among the parties if they choose to. If and when we need to make it a public issue, we will, but as of now, it is not.
In order to do that, you have to show that he intended to violate his civil rights. So it's not just that you intend to pull the trigger, it's that you intend to actually violate his civil rights. That's a pretty high bar. That's going to be a difficult thing for them to do.
And as we take a look at those scenes from yesterday's Fox News Sunday, Alan, the attorney for Mr. Wilson, is he correct? Will this be a hard thing to prove in terms of civil rights violations? I
would say impossible, not hard, impossible. You have to prove, number one, that Wilson would not have done this if the same situation had occurred with a 6'4", 300-pound white man charging at him, and that he made the decision based on race in order to deny Brown his civil rights. I don't think that's possible to be proved on this record. The worst you can prove is he made a mistake in judgment. So I think a civil rights action against Wilson is virtually impossible. If it were to be brought, it would be political and not legal in nature.
20 seconds, very quickly. Officer Wilson stepped down. His new wife is an officer. They're asking her to step down. Was it the right call for him to quit? And what about her?
That's ridiculous. That's sexism. That's collective punishment. That's absurd. She should not do that. Nobody should be asking her to do that. That's just not the way America works. You don't punish spouses for what you believe are the actions or improper actions of their husbands. That's just outside the ballpark of America.
Fair enough. Alan Dershowitz, please stay with us. When we come back, we'll talk about what's happening internationally as America's Forum continues. We're going to talk about that subject as we're rejoined by Alan Dershowitz. Alan, In the 5 minutes we have in this segment, we're going to get to Israel in just a second, but I would be remiss if I did not come to another issue on the docket. Pardon the pun, it's intended. The Supreme Court considering a far-reaching case probing the limits of free speech over the internet today. As we take a look at First Amendment rights and social media and the internet, before we get to Israel, your thoughts on the pending Supreme Court case, Alan?
Well, I think the Supreme Court will follow its general jurisprudence about threats and apply it to the Internet. The Internet is the most powerful modern form of communication, and the First Amendment has to be basically, we have to figure out how to relate the First Amendment, which was written at a time of print media only, to the most modern, fastest form of communication. And I suspect we'll see some interesting and innovative jurisprudence. My prediction is that Justice Kagan, who's particularly interested in this, may very well write this decision. And I think threats over the Internet, if they would have been punishable if expressed orally or in writing, will be punishable on the Internet as well. I think they'll try to come as close to paralleling what is permissible in print media and orally as on the social media as well. But there are differences, and we have to wait and see how it comes out.
And in the 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining, I just wonder, are we going to see in the opinion from the court, the famous limitation of the First Amendment, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater when no fire exists. I wonder what the internet equivalent might be. But apart from that language, there are other problems internationally. We touched on Israel and Iran. Talk that Iran is stepping up its capabilities with each day, possible nuclear testing there in the not too distant future. What is going to be Israel's response, Alan?
Well, Israel, I think, I can't speak for Israel, obviously, but I think they think that an attack on Iran is the second worst thing possible. But the first is Iran being close to developing nuclear weapons. Israel has to assume that Iran would use the nuclear weapons against it. It's the only suicide nation in the world. It sent 100,000 of its own children to die in the war with Iraq, giving them tokens to heaven. It talks about the culture of death all the time. It has explicitly threatened to annihilate Israel. So Israel has to assume that Iran having a bomb means Iran using a bomb. Even if there's only a 5 or 10% chance that's true, that has to be their operating assumption. And so Israel will attack Iran if it is on the threshold of making a nuclear bomb. That's why it's so important for the United States to make a good deal which stops the centrifuges from spinning, stops them from developing nuclear missiles, stops them from developing nuclear triggers. If the United States won't do it, Israel will do it. That'll be much riskier to everybody and to world peace, but Israel has no alternative. The United States would do the same thing if somebody had missiles directed at it. It did that in Cuba, obviously. It wouldn't prevent missiles to be landed in Cuba during the Kennedy administration, and Israel will not allow a threshold nuclear state that is sworn to its destruction to be a few hundred miles away.
About a minute and a half remains, Alan. Yahoo News reports that Iran's supreme leader said on Sunday that the armed forces of his nation should increase combat capability regardless of political considerations. Do you believe Iran will move forward to build up its military in addition to seeking nuclear weapons?
No question about that. They want to become the leader of the Middle East. They want to take over the Emirates if possible. And remember, too, they're building intercontinental ballistic missiles. You don't need that for Israel. You need that to reach the United States. They also have the capability of building suitcase bombs given to Hezbollah, which is its surrogate. Remember, Hezbollah once before blew up an American military barrack, killing several hundred Americans. So America is at great risk from a nuclear threshold Iran, and I hope this administration will understand that. What I fear is that my friend and Barack Obama may become the Neville Chamberlain of the 21st century if he makes a bad deal the way Chamberlain made a bad deal with the Nazis in the 1930s. I don't want to see that happen. I want to see a good deal or no deal and military action if necessary. But the worst thing would be for Iran to develop nuclear capacity, the worst thing for the United States, the worst thing for Israel, and the worst thing for world peace.
And Alan Dershowitz, we will leave it there. The words ringing in our ears comparing this president, a political ally of yours, to Neville Chamberlain, for the 21st century. Thanks very much, Alan. America's Forum continues. There you see the book from